Welcome to the Outer Realms with Michelle DeRoche and Amelia Pisano. Airing live on the United Public Radio Network, 105.3 FM in New Orleans.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday night segment of The Outer Realm. We are broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7 FM from the beautiful city of New Orleans. And brand new, we are broadcasting live on Roku. Yes, you heard it right, Roku. So seek us out. Anyway, we are completely sponsored by the amazing people over at Folgers Coffee who have been a part of our journey since the beginning. Thank you, Folgers. We appreciate you so very much and just could not do it without you. And it wouldn't be the same without you. Also, big thank you to Dr. Snick, the Sonic Surgeon, a.k.a. Justin Snicker, who's an award-winning composer of Halloween, horror, sci-fi, and dark wave electronic music. He is the voice that you hear on our intro and outro, and that is his music you are listening to. Also on our roster is Steve McGinnis, the artist behind the artwork here at the Outer Realm. Find him on Instagram and Facebook. Look at his amazing catalog of pieces that he has ready to go, and get your own commission. He does a lot of horror stuff, and he's actually well known for it, and does just beautiful, phenomenal work. So again, check him out. Now tonight, we welcome for the very first time Richard D. Lewis. He's an U.S. Air Force veteran, and he became a spiritual counselor. So he's going to be discussing his book, The Paranormal Christian. And yeah, as somebody who works in the paranormal field and has for the last 2 decades, there's a lot of really interesting things. And if you're a person of faith, it will be really fascinating to hear what he's got to say. So briefly, let's see here. He is a journalist veteran, the U.S. Air Force, a graduate of Defense Information School Writing Broadcast Public Affairs Program, joined the Air Force in 1987, spent 10 years as a broadcast journalist. This is quite a list of credentials. And he basically somehow changed things up. He ended up completing a course of Doreen Virtue's Angel Therapy Practitioner course, 2003 or 2003, became a certified spiritual counselor by the California Board of Hypnotherapy. He is also a communicant member of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod in good standing. So it's a list that goes on and on and on. And we're going to be waiting for him to coming in. Having problems connecting. William, how are you having a problem connecting? I see you, so you must be here. But hey, Kenny, hey, Tamara. So I don't know. You shouldn't be having any problem connecting. We're pretty much we're full on. From what I'm seeing here on the soundboard, everything is going no problem. So if you're having a bit of a struggle, just let me know and I'll see what I can do from this end. So we are just waiting for Richard to chime in. I'm just trying to see if I can get a little snippet from his book here. Let me read this little snippet. As you embark on this journey with me, I trust you will come to a greater understanding that we really do live in a wondrous universe. And he talks here about having communication and experiences with these interesting beings. So we'll say, angels and demons. And hold on, where are we going? I'm back for the third. I don't know, William. I see you. I've been seeing you the whole way through. And thank you. Voice is sounding perfect. Thank you very much, Kenny. That's my radio voice. So, what are you struggling with, William, exactly? Back for the third. I don't know. I don't know what your struggle is. You have to just Yeah, sorry, Big Brother appears to be watching me. Uh-oh. Ooh, that could be scary. That could be scary, my friend. Um, let me try to keep going on. He goes, the same year, he goes, he read uh, Jay Anson's chilling Amityville Horror on the balcony outside the Travelodge Motel in downtown Greensboro. And by 1978, when he was 9, he had absorbed probably hundreds of books on the paranormal. He is considered to be an expert, I guess, as much of an expert as you can be on the paranormal. And I'm just hoping here that he doesn't have a problem if we're having issues here. Hold on, just waiting, guys. I'm just trying to get this because we are in communication. Okay, good. So any of us in the field know that there's really no guarantee with respect to experts, so to speak. I know this because I filmed on enough television programs who have called me an expert. No matter how many times I say I'm not an expert, there's no such thing as an expert, especially in a field that is unexplained. And I think it's media that tends to label us more often than not. And it's a really hard it's a hard title to have. And when you have no creative control, at least from the film side of things, it makes it really difficult. I always joke around on the show that, most of the world probably thinks I run around screaming demon all the time, yet I'm, probably the most logical person, when it comes to researching, when it comes to just being biased and looking for the process of elimination. I'm known for going through the process of elimination and making sure that all the logical stuff gets taken care of first. It gets really, really tough because when I'm sitting in the hot seat, as I say, and I'm answering questions, I will give different variables, not just the D word, but let's face it, it's the one that sells. It instills that fear factor. So you sort of get stigmatized with it, but there are so many other things that are going on, and most researchers will tell you that there are a lot of logical things that can make us feel like we're being haunted. This house is haunted, and it's been a lot more haunted, and we were just able to get a lot of the spirit beings to move on. And you often hear little sounds, and those little sounds in a big house like this late at night, it could really it could let your mind run away so easily. And realistically, it's just common things. There's just nothing paranormal about it. So a lot of things to factor in when it comes to hauntings. And interestingly enough, a lot of those of us who really get involved in the field, I'm just rambling, guys, while we're waiting for our guest. A lot of us who are involved in the field tend to start out this way for many different reasons. A lot of times it is that personal experience, and that personal experience for me was the fact that, like, probably in a couple of different levels, but I'll start off with the fact that when I was really young, I used to be able to see dead people. I come from, a fairly long line of mediums, and on both sides of my family, I've come to find out that my father's side was just as spirited, even though he didn't like talking about it. You know, with him, it was always things like, oh, the house is settling, or, just critters in the roof or in the attic, things of that nature. But I could see dead people, and it was never discouraged in me. I was never made to feel silly. My family were the type of people that would show me photographs of family members and say, is there anybody you recognize? Um, and I could just pick somebody and I wouldn't know who they are because they were long past. So I think that support from my family and not feeling belittled or feeling foolish allowed me to continue in my growth with the spirit realm and things of that nature. But, things kind of started taking a turn for the worse. As I say, every time, puberty. You're at puberty, all of a sudden, we make things happen, especially young females. And my daughter went through the same thing. Things started moving around the house. I'd get a call, there's statues just moving across the tables. I know, but there's nothing in the house. This I know. So this is you. And that's a psychokinesis thing. So I'm sure I was projecting a whole lot of energy going through puberty. And by the way, women going through menopause can do the exact same thing. So, you know, we do create a lot of energy. We are creatures of emotion, being female especially, and we project that out. But make no mistake about it, people going through depression and high levels of anxiety can also do the same thing. High levels of stress, grief, when you're grieving for people, you can also project that kind of energy. So for me, it was definitely around, puberty when things started happening. And I'll go with this for a little bit, and then I'll tell you what, my other thoughts were. But I would have things going on in the house that were just ridiculous. The typical stuff, footsteps, and you would get knocking on the walls. I used to have, albums just flying out of their covers, just their slips, just flying out, just right across the room. Just crazy things like that. And again, like I was a pretty balanced individual. But it started to get heavier and heavier and heavier. So for me, also taking an interest in darker things. And I think it's because maybe something was influencing that interest. So how do you recognize somebody who's maybe, going through something like that? Well, for me, the signs I had, I mean, nowadays they'll say, because my daughter went through it, she goes, "Oh, you just think it's because I'm goth." I was like, "No, I don't think it's because you're goth at all." I always dress in black. I always have. Um, you have a little bit of a lifestyle going on. But when you sort of start to get really somber, you don't really want to be around people, you know. I can't go to sleep unless things like that happen in my house. Things like that happen a lot here. But it did for me back then as well. And you get very withdrawn. And I think that's part of things attaching themselves to you, entities attaching themselves to you. They just basically, they just back away. They back you away. They isolate you. It's sort of like this divide and conquer thing. They just do not want anybody helping you. They want you to feel isolated, hopefully, depressed or angry. And that's when you have somebody in your life going through that, especially, a young person, and I'll say anybody, because I've seen it with adults who just end up getting themselves in a bad situation when they go to maybe a haunted location. It happens. And I've seen it happen even with paranormal investigators. Something comes in. If you're off your game, it doesn't take much for something to just infiltrate your space. So, I mean, it's happened to the best of us. But with myself as a young person, probably from the ages of 14 to 18, I really started, my whole demeanor changed. I got a little bit aggressive and a little bit, I just like always argumentative. My mother would say, "Well, don't do this," or "Make sure you're home by this time." And I'd always make sure I came home an hour later, just a little bit rebellious as well. But I think we end up somehow snapping out of it at some point. I did on my own realize that something was wrong. Something was wrong, and something just wasn't, I just didn't know what it was, because I'll age myself a little bit here. There wasn't internet. If you wanted to find something out, you had to go to the public library. I didn't have that luxury of anybody else that I knew that was going through anything. I mean, my mom was pretty good about it. My father was sort of like, "I don't want to talk about it." It's like, it's not a thing. My mother knew something was wrong, because something in the house just felt wrong, especially as you went downstairs. And I wanted my room in the basement. I was the oldest. I wanted my own personal little space. It was all finished basement. So it was a nice space to be in. But in the same respect, it was a little bit of an isolated space. So right into as I got older, I ended up, you get to the age where you could go clubbing and things like that. And I would come home And I would feel something at my back all the time. It just got to a point where it's just like race. We're gonna have a race to the bedroom, and that was it. And I would close the door, and something would just like bam right into the door. I was just like, holy crud! Like this was a regular occurrence in my life. It was just craziness. But I knew enough that I had to do something about it, and that led me to being in the field and helping the people that I do, like even to this day. So what I ended up doing is trying to just have a bit of a lucid enough moment to realize something isn't right. I know something's here, and I don't like how it makes me feel when when you're not thinking straight. And that not thinking straight for a lot is times it was just feeling aggressive. You feel like this energy, you just feel like invincible, and that's how they want you to feel. But honest to gosh, like I had to do something because I had two younger sisters. One was 7 years younger than I was, the other one was 9.5 years younger than I was, and they were scared. And I'm thinking something, like I embraced this feeling for a little while until I realized this is just not right. And I don't want people in my family like having this heaviness. I remember having a friend visit. You may have heard me talk a little bit about this on my paranormal nightmare, because it's really the only time I've ever told my story to the extent that I did. And, you know, it was really, really hard growing up and feeling like if you do feel really isolated, because I didn't have friends who were, if they were gifted, they weren't talking about it. If they had things going on, and I know I had one friend who went through a lot of abuse in her life, and I know something was there, and maybe that's where that attachment came from, because it was really hardcore abuse, and so much so that it affected her life into adulthood, and she died very young, just through alcoholism and taking medication for depression, anxiety, and it is really sad, because I didn't have all those issues until I ended up in this area that we moved to, and my best friend was having all of this happening to her, and she probably didn't even realize it. So it's just interesting how things just slide in like that, you know? So let me address some questions as we go through. Tamara, I was lucky to be taught to own my space and recognize paranormal issues and ask a family member for help at a young age. I had my mother for that. I had an aunt also. I had one aunt who was only 10 years older than I was, because it was a large family. So she was the baby. But she was like one of those cool aunts. So, it's like, yeah, okay, we're going to just play with this Ouija board and see if we can get some answers. I'm 14 going, yeah, let's do it. Oh, our special guest is here, so I don't have to just keep rambling. Hello. How are you?
Hello, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Oh my God, I'm sorry I'm late. Yeah, I'm here in Los Angeles, and the traffic, I had to make it across town. I could have really used some paranormal type magic
Intervention?
tonight, but it didn't quite work out. Yeah.
Oh, that's
Oh
okay.
gosh.
I was just gearing
Yeah.
everybody up for, the topic of the evening, because, I had an attachment as a young teen, and going through the signs and things like that, what to look for in people in your life if they go through it. So, I'm glad now everybody's primed up just waiting for you. So
Perfect. Perfect.
yeah, so no
Thank you.
problem at all. So thank you for being here. I've been like, thank God for the spreadsheet you sent me. It just had so much information in it, because I'm trying to, this house is sold, and you're trying to bridge through another one with a 5-day closing in between, and you're just like, my days have just been, let's just say, buying or selling never goes the way you think it's going to go. So
No, it doesn't.
anyhow. So why don't we start from the beginning? Because this is something we were talking about. You don't always just fall into the paranormal. There's that one thing that one experience that is usually the catalyst that paves the way. So why don't we'll start with your humble beginnings and you take it from there.
Sure. Well, you know, the thing about the paranormal is it's actually normal, and that's the thing about it. I don't think that we should, look for a ghost behind, every sound, every creak in the night. I mean, because old houses they creak, they make sounds,
Yeah.
shadows cast on the walls,
Yes.
and it could be something very natural. But um there's an invisible world that surrounds each and every one of us, and it's alive and it's active. For me, it started with a voice. Okay, and that was my first encounter, and it really opened up my mind as far as what's out there that's more than us, um well, for example, when I was a young boy, I used to walk from school. Um, After I got off the school bus, I used to have to walk to my grandmother's house every night because my mother, single parent, and she worked the night shift and things quite often. So I would be unsupervised, and it was over 2 miles that I had to walk every night when I got off the bus. And
Mhm.
we would never let our children do that today, but things were
Nope.
different years ago.
Yes.
So, and I always felt this presence watching over me, guarding me, guiding me, and I never got anything problems except for this one time where I was abducted, and I don't mean by aliens. I have to, I
Right.
have to,
Yeah.
I have
It's
to
that
point
kind of
that
a
out.
show.
When we're dealing
Right.
with a paranormal audience, I always want to make sure that they're clear about that. No,
Mhm.
but I was abducted as a boy on one of these walks, and I detail this fully in my book, The Paranormal Christian, Book One.
Mhm.
And you can get my books at richarddlewisauthor.com. So in book one, I talk about this because this was really big. But I was abducted, and I was crossing the railroad tracks. It's actually, if you can look at a map of Greensboro, North Carolina, where I grew up, and you can see exactly where I'm talking about. But heading towards down Pine Street towards East Market to cross the street. It's actually a giant thoroughfare, and there's a railroad track there, and I would cross that every day. Well, one day I was crossing it, and this kid, a teenager, uh, yelled out to me. He's like, "Hey, kid, wait up!" And so, we're taught to obey our elders and all that kind of stuff. The way
Mhm.
I was raised, and it's just you're just kind of you're just I just froze in my tracks,
Mhm.
literally on the tracks. And this young man came over to me and started asking me questions and talking to me. And after a while, I was basically like, well, I want to leave. And pretty soon I realized that I was actually his captive, because anytime I tried to move away from him, he would grab me by the shoulders and hold me in place. And he was a bigger, stronger kid. He was like 16, 17, and
Mhm.
I was like 7 years old.
Right.
So I wasn't going to be able to leave. And after some time, this became clear. But he would even act like he was playing with me, because on a couple of occasions, cars would slow down as they passed by, and like, "Hey, what's going on over there? It looks kind of suspicious." And
Mm.
he would take me by the hands and act like we were dancing. We dance me around and stuff. So they probably, and then they would drive off. Probably thought, "Oh, he must be his big brother or something."
Mhm.
So after a while, he said, "I want to introduce you to my friend." So he took me down the railroad tracks, and away from to my grandma's, where I was headed. And it was a bit of a trek. And
Mm.
eventually we got to this spot where he led me off of the railroad tracks, down this embankment, to this old dilapidated shack that was off in the distance. And inside the shack, there was an older gentleman there, and so he introduced me to him, and the two of them began asking questions. The older guy was in charge, and they made me do things I didn't want to do. They were asking questions. I didn't really fully understand what was going on, but
Mhm.
because I was so young. But I
Yes.
knew it
Yes.
wasn't, I knew it wasn't good.
Mhm.
And anyway, so there came a point where they were going to tie me up. And the at first the younger man tried to do it initially, and I was struggling and resisting and uh screaming and stuff. And so the guy kind of, hey, we got plenty of time, whatever, and had him, and called him off of me for a while. But then finally he said, okay, now let's go ahead and tie him up. So they set me down in this chair, and when they did that, it was the two of them together. So the older man was here. The younger man came around with the rope. It was like this nylon rope that they were going to tie my hands behind me onto the chair. And and the older man was kind of holding me and controlling me while the younger man was coming around with the rope. And as they did, there was this split second where the younger man was trying to get the rope around my hands, and the older man released, and there was a voice, very clear and loud, that said, "Run now." So I jumped out of the chair immediately, and in that instant, it must have been like a split second. I bolted towards the door. There was actually a deadbolt on the door of the shack. I pulled that open, and I could pretty much feel the breath of the younger man on the hairs on my neck, as I was trying to get out of this shack. And I sprinted out, I burst through the door, sprinted out to the hill, ran up the hill, got back on the railroad tracks, and just never stopped. And I've never moved that fast in my life.
Right.
I looked down, my legs were like a blur. And again, I didn't really understand what was going on, but I knew I needed to get away.
Right.
So the boy gave chase. He was yelling, "Hey kid, wait up, stop!" And I'm not sure how I did it, how I managed to, because this bigger, stronger kid, how I managed to outrun him, but I left him in the dust. And I remember looking back and seeing him finally double over because he was winded, and I never stopped. I sprinted all the way down the railroad tracks, all the way back to Pine Street, all the way across the tracks to East Market, crossed this big thoroughfare East Market Street, and scampered right up the steps into my grandmother's arms. And she was actually outside on the porch looking for me at this point. And so was my Aunt Kathy was out there too. Both of them looking around because they're like, where's Richard? Because I was,
should have been there by now.
Should have been there by now.
Right.
So this experience, I consider it a miracle. I feel like it saved my life.
Yes.
And it made me feel like I was here for a reason, but we're all here for a reason, honestly.
Yes.
But it put me in touch with that higher power, that's there. And so I wanted to find out more. And I'm a lifelong Christian. My brand is the Paranormal Christian. That's what I call myself. Yes. But I feel like every Christian is a paranormal Christian, because if you read the Bible, it's a paranormal proof text from cover to cover. So my calling in this is to be able to correlate those worlds, put it all together, because there's too much division between, people of the Christian faith, people of the other world faiths, people who are interested in the paranormal. They're atheists that are interested in the paranormal, and all these people are, I'm seeing a common picture. We're all saying the same thing. Sometimes we use different words, but it's all pointing to the same source,
Yeah,
and that's where it all started for me. So I tuned in, and I found that this voice was always there, So when I started going to church as a young kid, and people were talking about God, I'm like, I don't know if you've seen the movie Elf with Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
I love that movie. That's like a modern Christmas classic. Well, that scene where he's a human, but he's been raised as an elf, right, his whole life. So
that's
and
right.
now he's in New York with with some beautiful scenes with Walter Matthau and everything, and this one scene, he's in the department store, and he's got a job there, and he finds out that Santa Claus is coming, to the department store. The next thing, he's like, goes crazy, he's like, I know him, and he means literally, I literally know Santa Claus. Well, so when people started talking about God, it wasn't like you had to, it was like, I know him. I've already met him, So to me, going to church and learning theology and studying the Bible and stuff like that was, to understand this reality that I was already in touch with.
Right. Yeah, it's a deep connection, but I agree with you with this division, because everybody labels it. And I always say, the paranormal has no prejudices. It affects everybody from all walks of life, all faiths, there's so many similarities. It's just like I often ask myself, why do we divide it?
Right. Well, and I chose the Paranormal Christian with intent, and the term is polarizing. It's
Mhm.
polarizing to a lot of the people of my Christian faith, but actually paranormal used to be the word that was chosen to be the clinical word, because the word supernatural was the word that was polarizing. So people chose
Right,
paranormal because it sounded more scientific. Well, now
right.
paranormal's becomes to the stigma. The
It's
the
true.
the thing
It's
is that
true.
it means the same thing. Paranormal,
Right.
supernatural. If you are a Christian, then you have a supernatural faith. That's what's revealed to us. And like you said, all people around the world, all faiths, have this common understanding that there's something greater than them, that there's a source that from which we come.
Mhm,
Ghost stories are something that are held with all cultures and all regions across time,
mhm,
and the Bible talks about these things
mhm.
if you have a careful eye to see it. And this is
Right.
the things I try to reveal in my books and my series, the Paranormal Christian, books
Mhm.
1 and 2, and I'm working on my third book right now.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. We'll have to come back when your book is done. I
I would
love
love
that.
to do that. Yes, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So tell us about the book then. Like you're obviously well, before we get to the book, let's just bridge you into what made you get into even wanting to write the books.
Well, I've always been interested in questions like, where do we come from? What does this mean? The big questions. What's it all about? The experiences that I've had and that people that I've talked to have had. And then as a Christian in the faith, and I'm looking at this beautiful religion that has all of this wonder and nuance and amazing things and revelations, and then I'm going, but no one's talking about like the ghost stories that we talk about at home around the dinner table or around the
I
campfire. When
agree with you.
why
Yes.
can't we talk about that stuff? We have these questions, and one of the commands of the Christian faith to the faithful is that we're supposed to be able to provide, if someone asks us, a question
Mhm.
and wants to know where our faith is coming from, we're supposed to be able to explain that.
Mhm.
And in the scriptures, it talks about having revealed, the whole counsel of God. So
Mhm.
if it's in there, if it's a part of it, then we got to look at it.
Right.
The Bible has stories like in Genesis 6 where it talks about the Nephilim. Well, what is
Yes.
this? We're
Yes.
talking about angelic beings
Mhm.
breeding with humans, and
It's like,
uh and
"What?"
and then
Yes.
your imagination just explodes. You look at the book of Enoch, for example,
Oh, yes, absolutely.
and
And
you get a little
Ezekiel.
more insight into some of these things that are going on, and it's
Yes.
like, man, there's a bigger picture there. So I wanted to try to correlate that,
Mm,
these worlds, bridge those gaps, bring it all together, and number one, let Christians know that it's okay to have these questions, and it's not just, well,
mm,
hush hush, whisper whisper. The Bible addresses these things,
mhm,
and for the people that are not Christians that are interested in the supernatural, I would just say, hey, Christianity's got a lot of insight, and a lot of people have been alienated from the church, for whatever reason. They've
mm,
got all kinds of red flags come up when you use the word, like a word like God. Right?
mhm,
What does that mean? Well, God
mm,
is love. That's what the Christian faith tells us, and that's what I
mhm,
believe all the faiths of the world tell us.
mhm,
And we're not about exclusivity. We're about inclusion. We're about
mhm,
loving our fellow
mhm.
person. And
Right.
uh, John 3:16 is the probably the most famous scripture of all, and it says, "For God so loved the world."
Mhm,
Okay, and that means everyone. And by the
mhm.
way, the original word there for world, translated into English as world, is actually cosmos.
Oh,
Okay,
that's
so
right.
that means all of the created order. Okay, that
Yes.
means all people. That means
Mhm.
all beings. In the God cares about the animals.
It's
It
true.
means it means all beings out there in the universe, if there's other life out there besides us. So
Mhm, mhm,
um and the intention that we get from the Bible is that God wants all people to be saved.
Hmm.
So I don't think God is going to be frustrated in his efforts.
No, I agree. And I think, you know, the stigma, I think, is a lot of it has to do with misunderstanding. Like one of the worst cases, the lengthiest cases that I've worked on, and that went on for over a year because it was very complicated. Because the wife was Christian and the husband was Muslim, so they had the similarities, but yet enough differences that we could just not get anything resolved. So I called on a friend of mine who was a Christian minister out of North Carolina, and he said, we have a team. Then they travel the world and they do these deliverances, and it's like a version of exorcism. I said, okay, so I'd like to bring them in. He said, absolutely. But he was also a theologian. So we would just spend hours debating, and just like, it was just always bouncing ideas around because of the theology behind it. He was just so hardcore about stuff. So I learned a lot. But I'll tell you something. When they came in just to talk about just like not understanding, I had never witnessed this before. And I had been doing and working, I only worked, with malevolent attachments and things of that nature. So you're dealing with the faith of the family, you're dealing with sometimes psychologists or psychiatrists and diagnosis. Like, there's a lot depending on what faith they follow. Like, for example, Catholicism. No, we want psychiatric assessments times two. Like, then I need permission from the doctors, and it gets really convoluted. But in this case, this team came in, and she was lovely. She would just walk in, she looked around, and she was also, because she was gifted, so she could feel everything around. And she said it's very difficult as a Christian, you know, to have these abilities, like with her growing up. She said, because some of the community would just shun that. They're just like, no, you don't talk about things like that. And she goes, it was like that family secret. I couldn't talk about it. But as I got older and they showed me how to make use of these abilities, look at me just messing around with the board again. They showed me how to use the abilities, and she started speaking in tongues and things like that. And I never witnessed that. And her husband was with her, goes, brace yourself, because if you've never heard this, it sounds like a lot of gibberish, but she completely understands what's going on. It's like, okay. So I was kind of excited because I was still like, I'm learning something new. I've never experienced this. Out of this location, there were 2 places that were infected because this entity, attached to a medium who had been trying to help before at this main location, and it split, because they could attach to multiple locations at a time. She came in to the main house, and she said, I'll take care of everything. Don't worry about it. The other house isn't even a concern. I'm like, I've got to see this. This is amazing. And 2 hours, she basically, when she started speaking in tongues, I was just like, I did not know what to make of it. I had never heard it. I'm thinking, if this can clear 2 houses in one shot, oh my gosh, and she did. In 2 hours,
Wow.
cleared both locations, and it stayed quiet for about 2 years. And she passed away, unfortunately. And after in that time frame, so then I had to go back to the old-fashioned way of clearing the place. But I found that fascinating. And
Well,
that's
yeah, and that's a great story. And in the Bible, it tells us in the prophecies, it says that in the last days, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh. And
mhm,
then we see this coming true in the book of Acts.
right.
The day of Pentecost, and when the Holy Spirit was poured out, and people began to speak in tongues, and there's many other manifestations of the Spirit. But God's Spirit has always been with us,
Mm,
and it talks about how people will have visions and dream dreams.
mm,
And you talk about mediumship. This is the reason why a lot of people don't understand the reason why the Bible has these warnings against mediumship and things. Is because it's out of a preponderance of caution, because you don't always know who you're talking to, and there's the danger of spirit attachments and things like that. So you can have some unwelcome guests if you're
mm,
not careful with these kind of
mhm,
things. But that doesn't mean that spirits don't interact with us. In
Mhm.
fact, the Bible tells us to test the spirits, to see if they're from God. So, how can you test the spirits if you don't interact with them? And I
Mm,
certainly think that God allows a provision for spirit communication in that
mm,
we have our guardian angels,
mhm,
we have intuitions, we
mhm,
have things that we know, things, your gut feelings, sometimes a voice, like I mentioned before. And these are all incredible. But ultimately, what the faith teaches us is that the name of Jesus is the name above all other names.
mhm,
And what does his name means? Well,
mhm.
um, his name is actually Yeshua, and it's
Yes.
become, we've kind of, we could say it
Yes.
now, Jesus is we kind of slur it into Jesus now, but it's still
Mhm,
the same name, it still means the same thing. It means it's our salvation. It's
mhm,
God that saves us. Emmanuel is God that's with us,
mhm,
same person, okay, same being, and it's the name that's above all other names. In the name of
mhm,
Jesus, you see, there's power, and
mhm,
anybody that's having problems with spirit attachments, poltergeist activity,
mhm,
even if you're not a Christian,
mhm.
I would say to you, in faith, call on the name of Jesus and see what happens. It's even been documented that alien abductions end when people call on the name of Jesus Christ. So
Mhm,
there is great power, and when it comes to delivering people from unwelcome entities,
mhm,
I don't, I have,
mhm.
it's amazing. It really is.
Right, right. It's fascinating. I had a Christian friend say to me at one time, and maybe you can clarify or clear it up. She said, "We don't believe in spirits. Everything to us is demonic. They're mimicking, and we do know they mimic. So, do you believe that spirits interact, or do you believe that they're all this is demons at work?"
Well, this is a common belief among many of the faithful, and it's very
Mhm.
interesting because, again, as the paranormal Christian, I get a lot of pushback from both sides. So,
Right, right.
especially from Christians, actually, and that's one of the reasons is because it's like, well, first of all, there's people that don't believe in any spirit interactions at all.
That's true. Yeah.
There's all kinds of teachings and beliefs and thoughts out there. Um, and again, like I said, there's the whole spectrum. There's people that are atheists, but yet they believe in the paranormal. So
Right.
it's
Yeah,
very
it's funny.
interesting.
That's I know.
It is,
Right.
but what I see is a spectrum, okay,
Mm,
of, if you look at the natural world, okay, God
mhm,
is a creative being, okay, and the diversity in the natural world, uh, it's amazing, from the macro to the micro, right, all the
right.
way to the subatomic. You see wonderful creativity from space to the jungles, to the deserts.
Mhm,
You go into the deep oceans where there's no sunlight. You see bio
right.
luminescence going on
Yes.
with creatures creating their own light.
Mhm,
It's like a Christmas decoration show down there.
mhm.
There's all this diversity. So why wouldn't the spirit world be just as diverse? So I
I
think it's
agree.
very, yeah, it's very, I think, uh, very low level thinking to put everything into this. Well, it must be a demon, right? And I think that's actually to the devil's advantage,
Mhm.
right? To either be scaring people that everything's a demon, right?
It's empowering them, really.
Yes. Or the
Mm,
other side of the spectrum, which is that there's no devil, there's no demons
right.
at all. There's a lot of people in our community that don't believe that there's anything nefarious out there. And I think you can just
Mm,
look around and see that evil is a real and present force in the world.
mhm.
So you have
Right.
a full spectrum. And by the way, I've again, in my book series, The Paranormal Christian, I really dug into this deeply as far as what does the church actually teach?
Yes.
What does the catechisms say? What
Mhm.
if the church fathers said?
Right.
What are the doctors of the church said over the years? And
Mm,
they don't say that we can't have communication from our loved ones.
mhm,
In fact, I believe that God allows a provision for this to happen. If
mhm,
you talk to anybody, they will have stories of in their family of a departed loved one
mhm,
that comes to them in a dream. Okay, they don't usually say very much, but they do visit us. I've had it
mhm.
happen myself. I've had it happen so clearly and distinctly that I know what I've experienced, and all these people that I read about, and again, it's not just in the Christian faith, but all around the world having similar experiences, there does seem to be a provision for that for other spirits.
Mm-hmm.
In the Bible, there's a proof text for ghosts. I mean, it's implicit, at least, when on at least 2 occasions Jesus appeared to the disciples and they thought he was a ghost. The Bible clearly says that. Now, some
Mm-hmm.
Christians want to really, they really want to split hairs on this and be like, well, if you look at the original Greek, it's talking about spirit. And I'm like, okay, well, so what?
Mm-hmm.
He, on the water, when he walked on the water, which, by the way, is a very supernatural event
Mm-hmm.
in and of itself.
Right.
But it says that they thought he was a ghost, and he said, take heart, it is I, or I am, in the
Mm-hmm.
original tongues. Basically, I'm God. Okay.
Right. Right.
So they were terrified, though. And then when he appeared to them in the resurrection, it also says that they thought he was a ghost, and he says, look and see for yourself, touch me, for a ghost doesn't have flesh and bone as you see that I have.
Right. Right.
And so he basically gives a proof text on what a ghost is. And if it was something that wasn't, there's no such thing as ghosts, well, he could have debunked it right there.
Mm-hmm.
He could have said, guys, there's no such thing as ghosts. What are you,
Right.
why are
And
you tripping
didn't.
out?
Yeah, he didn't. He just said, I'm just not. Right.
Right. A
Right.
ghost doesn't have flesh and bone as you see that I have. So
Right.
that implies an existence of ghosts. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, there's a whole, diaspora of
Mm-hmm.
spiritual beings out there from, and the Bible talks about this: powers, principalities.
Mm-hmm.
We've got angels, and I think
Yes.
human spirits
Yeah.
interact with us too.
Mm-hmm. Well, guides, spirit guides as well. I mean, that's what, which was, it's a big argument among people. People will basically say, no, I have an experience. I know what my loved one feels like. But it's a really fine line, because if you know, so do they know. And there is a lot of problems with mimicking.
That does
Abdullah says
happen.
several
That does
references to
happen.
ghosts in the Bible. Yes. Oh, I completely. I've got recordings of children being mimicked. Then you get the big growl that comes afterwards. It's like, they're definitely a thing.
Well, here's the thing, and actually, what you said, I exactly agree with, because I've had, my mother has, I've had after death communications with my mother,
Yes.
and I get in my books, I get into these experiences in very specific detail,
Mm-hmm.
but I know my mom, I know who my mom
Right.
is,
Right.
and here's the other problem too with assuming that everything is demonic.
Mm-hmm.
These experiences, they offer comfort to people. They give people hope. And that's not the devil's game. The devil is a discourager, right? He discourages our faith.
Mm-hmm.
So what does he have to gain by giving us hope? So
I mean,
that's
yeah, my personal opinion is, because I've worked with a lot of grieving people, is that they want the sign so desperately that they don't always know where it's coming from. I've seen more people get in trouble because they're just waiting so desperately, like communication comes. It's like a slow infiltration. You don't always, you start to confuse the signs.
but
And
for me, anytime I've ever had any type of paranormal experience,
Mhm.
and I mean, I've had experiences that run the gamut. I've had poltergeist experiences in my
Yes,
home.
yeah.
I've seen all kinds of spiritual beings,
Hmm.
and I've had communications, like I said, after death communications. And
Hmm.
anytime any of these things happens, and I've seen ghosts as well,
Right.
and UFOs too. And
Yeah.
anytime any of these things happen, I'm never looking for it. I never expect it, and
Hmm.
it never looks like what I think it should look like. So
Right.
it's never my imagination.
Right.
When I saw Mary for the first
Right.
time,
Right. How was
uh,
that?
I was not expecting. I didn't even know that Mary could appear to me. I didn't even.
Mm.
I mean, I knew. See, I was raised as I was raised in the Protestant,
Mhm.
background,
Mhm.
as a Baptist,
Right.
and the many of the Protestants, and certainly the Baptists, they like with the separation from the the Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox. You look at the older churches, and they've held on to a lot of the traditions. And now I got to tell you, as a Protestant, once I started discovering for myself the activity of the saints and learning that they're real and learning that they really exist and that they do work and help us. And I felt robbed when I saw Mary for the first time. I had to apologize to her, honestly, because I know that Mary is a real person, is a historical person that lived, the mother of Jesus. In the church, we call her the mother of God, because if Jesus is God, then she's the mother of God. That's not idolatry to reverence her. It's not worship. So the first time I saw Mary, I had to apologize and say, hey, I'm sorry, because I didn't acknowledge you properly. I mean, I knew that you were a historical person, that you're in heaven, but I didn't know that. I mean, you're real and active and working in people's lives. And in the Memorare, it says that never has a person who's basically come to you seeking your aid been left, unhelped, unaided. And that's what the Memorare confesses and teaches us. And, I've tested it out. Not testing God, but just to say, like, Mother Mary, pray for me, intercede for me. Now, Jesus is our intercessor. That's what the Bible teaches us. That's what we believe and confess. But that doesn't mean that there isn't a family. We talk about the communion of saints, and it's like a family at home. If you tell mama something, daddy's going to hear it too. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes the problem is better solved that way, because that's the way God wants us to work. He wants us to work in communion. He wants us to work as a family with each other, not in isolation. Of course, through Jesus is our great high priest. We have direct access to God. You can talk to God anytime. But when you talk to any of the saints, you're talking to God. See, that's the thing about it, right? So it's like people are like, well, you can't pray to Mary. Well, what is a prayer? A prayer is a petition. Can you make a petition to a friend on earth? Can you go to a pastor or your mom or your dad or your best friend and say, hey, pray for me? Yes, you can. So there's nothing different from that. Or turning to Archangel Michael and saying, hey, Archangel Michael, defend us in battle. Be our defense against the wickedness and snares of the devil. I mean, that's just saying, like, hey, big brother, hey, big buddy, big strong buddy, I need your help, pal. Help me out here. Please, with all due respect to your majesty as a great celestial being, but I need some help here. It's not worship. You're not worshiping the angel.
It's a request.
Yes, help me.
Yeah.
Same thing if you're getting bullied and you say, hey, dad, hey, my daddy's bigger than your daddy. I mean, it's it's the communion of saints. It's a family. And just because someone dies, it's not cut off.
Well, it's your essence that lives on, right? It's not the physical. It's what's inside that lives on. So it lives on.
Well, in the faith, a lot of people don't understand this, and I really take a deep look at this in my Paranormal Christian book series. But we're soul, our soul essence. Okay, we're spirit, soul, and body. Right, 3 parts. Right. So we are a trinity in ourselves, and we're made in God's image, and God is a trinity. So if you actually look at what the Bible says about that, and the church doesn't even really get into this deeply, and I've actually studied it, and I feel like God has kind of opened my mind to truly understand what this means, because, okay, this body it is us. Okay, it's not like the ancient Greek teachings where the body is evil. The body itself is not an evil. It's good. God created it to be good. I mean, you can do bad with it, but you need a spirit to animate the body, and when the spirit animates the body and through the mind, and you have the consciousness, well, that's the soul. So, and then when the spirit leaves the body at death, then the body is no longer a body but a corpse. And I'm talking death as in not coming back. I'm not talking about near-death experiences where you're still tethered to your body. So that is our essence. And so the spirit, it goes forth. And we believe in the church that at someday you will be united with a resurrection body. But what about reincarnation? That's another idea.
Reincarnation is a big one, because not a lot of faiths believe in it, but it is mentioned in the Bible.
I believe in reincarnation, and I know I'm in the minority as a Christian. It's considered a heresy in the church, but I have studied it. And it's just, I believe it to be true. I'm not, if you don't believe in it,
Hmm.
I mean, you have the right to believe however you want to believe in your faith, but I don't believe it contradicts the Bible, and I explain this in my book series. But that's what we are, spirit, soul, body, and the spirit, our essence still goes on. Life after death is real. In the Bible, it talks about, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the God of the living, not the
Hmm.
dead. And this is spoken long after these men have died and were buried. So that
Hmm.
tells me there, we live
Yeah.
on, our life goes on, and
Mm.
and we're living even though our bodies may be dead.
Hmm. Yeah, it's very difficult to discount. You have like children who are coming out talking about past lives and such, and I think that's part of it's part of. I think it's a big part of life, personally.
James Leninger's story, it blows me away. There's so many children that talk about this. I actually have a never before published story in my most recent book, the Paranormal Christian book 2, The Quickening, where I
Hmm.
talk about a young girl in Mexico who kept telling her parents, and specifically her grandmother, I carried you.
Ah.
I carried you. Do you remember when I used to carry you? And for a while they're entertaining this, and it's kind of cute little kid. But after a
Right.
while, the grandma starts getting annoyed. Says like, "Hey, you stop it. Mija, I carried you. No." And then the little girl says, "No. Remember, I carried you when we lived in." And she names this this village
Yes.
that the grandmother was a child in.
Right.
That there's no way this little girl would know. You know,
Right. Right.
things like this, past life memories. Kids are coming out with this now, and like I said, it's all inspiring, and you can't just discount it. And as the thing about the Paranormal Christian, my brand and what I'm all about is discovery and exploration, and wherever the facts lead us. And so you have to be open to the supernatural. You have to be open to science and what science teaches us. You have to be open to your own counsel as
Hmm.
well, and you have to put it all together. And yes, we have our teachers and our parents, our friends, our spiritual advisors. Our I'm not discounting any of that, but you put it all together, and then between you and your relationship to God, to the higher power, to the source from which we all come, then you kind of come to an understanding of the big picture.
Hmm. I agree. I agree. And as Tamara says, she goes, the Bible speaks of Jesus coming back. So is that not a reincarnation?
Well, and Jesus actually speaks of what I consider reincarnation when he talks about John, because, and here's another thing too, the disciples were, asking, who is John?
Right. Right.
Is he Elijah who was to come? And why would they be talking like this? I mean, this sounds like reincarnation to me. And
It
then
does.
Jesus affirms that, and he says, yes, he is John. John is Elijah that was to come. And some people say, well, he came in the spirit of Elijah. Okay, well, once again, you're splitting hairs. It's
Hmm.
like this guy is Elijah. But here's the thing, Elijah was Elijah too, right?
Hmm.
So, you know, I'm Richard, you're Michelle.
Right.
That's who we are right now.
That's
The
right.
essence that we are, if we return as I believe that we do,
Hmm.
then we might be different. Like James Leninger, for example, young boy starts having these nightmares when he's about 2 years old, and he's talking about, Little Man on Fire.
Hmm.
Really interesting. The reason why this is such a great case study is because his parents were Christians who didn't believe in reincarnation,
Right.
and James was drawing pictures of dog fights, and he was signing them James the Third, right? And so as they finally, the parents started, looking into this and like, why does this kid know these things and why is he saying this stuff? Like there's a story where in the book where the mom gives him like a toy airplane, and
Right.
she's like, look at it's even got the bombs on there, and he's like, mommy, that's not a bomb, that's a drop tank. You know,
Uh-huh. So
he
how would he know?
how would he know what a
That's
drop
right.
tank is? And he can't even pronounce
Yeah.
it yet
That's
because
right.
he's so little. So
Yes.
I didn't even know what a drop tank was, and I'm an Air Force veteran. So that story
Right.
blew me away. So anyway, James was talking about coming from the Natoma. So they found out that there was an aircraft carrier called the Natoma Bay. They researched it, and they found his best friend who served on that aircraft carrier with him, who was still alive and remembered James getting shot down. The other
Oh my
James.
God. I think this covered on television?
It's
Like, and
it's
it's because it sounds very familiar. That was a really compelling.
it's a
Uh,
very compelling story. In
yes,
recent
yes.
years, Ancient Aliens has covered it.
Okay,
Of course,
okay,
I document this in my book, and
right.
so these stories are very, very compelling, especially the stories that are emerging from children. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you explain that? And I don't want to hear the whole well it's demons, because I mean, come on, man, like what are
It's a
demons?
tough one. Yeah, it's a tough one because, I think what doesn't help is media. Media just sensationalizes it. I've done tons of this, and we were just talking about that before we came on. I said, I'm sure the entire world thinks I run around screaming demon because I am a contributor, and I will contribute to stories that they put on. They call it the experts. So it's like, oh, okay, sure, it's very hard. There are no experts in a field that really cannot be explained per se, but you can give 5 or 6 different viable answers, but they don't want to hear it. They want the fear factor. But in doing so, unfortunately, it's what people think everything is.
Well,
Never mind, it's like
it,
psychokinesis and all, poltergeist activity, things like that.
there's so much out there, and I mean, we can spend the rest of our life exploring it, and we'll it's like an onion. You peel back a layer, you find another. But this thing about reincarnation, again, like I say, I don't force people to believe in it, because people, you believe what you're going to believe, but they even look like the person that they reincarnated from. I mean, it's uncanny if you look at some of these side by side pictures of people that
Mhm.
are believed to be reincarnated, who claim to be reincarnated. It's really quite compelling.
Mm. Well, and I have heard of Dorothy Eady, who the
Yes,
reincarnated Egyptian living in Ireland,
yes,
knowing hieroglyphs from a very young age. You just can't
great
make that
story. Yes.
stuff up. It's just you're just born knowing this stuff? No. No, I don't think so.
Well, and you
Uh,
see the people usually over time will lose touch with those memories, because they've got to get on with the life that they're living. So, if you're James number three, well, you got to be James number three now, and let James number one rest in peace.
right. Agreed, agreed. Tamara says, was a drop tank not the bomb against the water dams that were dropped on water and they rolled to cross the water to hit the dam? I don't know.
That's a good question. I'm not an expert on World
Yeah,
War
I don't
II
know.
aircraft, but I know that a drop tank is not implicitly a bomb.
Right. Okay. Good, good. Okay. So, aside from just paranormal experiences you've had, extraterrestrial experiences, do you believe that they go hand in hand? Because I mean, we know that, let's talk Enoch and Ezekiel, we know it's all there, right? It's like this is ancient stuff, ancient sightings, ancient
Well,
experiencers.
here's the thing. Our ancestors had a supernatural worldview, and that's what I'm trying to do. And that's why I chose the name Paranormal Christian, because, and I realize it's polarizing, but it also gets people's attention because it is a supernatural faith. And so when you read the Bible and you read the scriptures, and the canonical and the deuterocanonical books, the apocrypha books that are included in the canon, books outside the canon, they all inform us and teach us things.
Mhm.
Book of Enoch, for example.
Yeah.
And but you can clearly see that these people had a supernatural worldview. If you look at the tribal cultures around the world, they have a
Hmm.
supernatural worldview.
Hmm.
In like the Native American traditions, they talk about
Yes.
the Great Spirit.
Hmm.
I'm very interested in these various spiritual practices, and I think we're talking about the same source being. So
Hmm.
I'm trying to return people to that supernatural worldview, not to overstate the point that the supernatural is real, but just to understand that it's just a natural part of our existence.
Hmm. It is. I also believe people. like for myself, all these years I knew I had an attachment at some point, and I was able to get rid of, like, even from a young age, I knew this something that's not right. And I went to proper stages to get rid of that. Then I find out years later that I'm also an experiencer, probably abductee. And they do go hand in hand. And I think a lot of them get mixed up, misinterpreted. So, for example, what faith, to the faithful, Joe, I'm just going to punch you when I see you. That's my producer goofing around. Anyway, I have a long reach, mister. Anyway, um, what the faithful will call angels and demons, you'll get maybe ufologists who might say reptilians and light beings. What are your thoughts? Do you think
It's
is
very
this how we
interesting.
label them? Yeah.
Well, yeah, if you look at, for example, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden
Mm,
and the serpent, you look at this and this the word you really get into the what does the word mean? What does the original
mm.
Hebrew word mean? And you start talking about the Nakash, and it means the shining ones.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's very interesting. That's very informative. And you start talking about reptilians, and then you start
Mm,
talking about serpents, and they
mhm,
start sounding like the same thing. So, and what is extraterrestrial? I mean, if so, we have this created order, right? Since the Big Bang, which which is where everything propagated from, all time, space,
mm,
energy, and matter
mhm,
came from the Big Bang. So a lot of people just think about the matter, the stars and the elements. I mean, we had to have 14 billion years of stars birthing and dying to come up with enough stuff to make us,
mhm.
and but there's also time, right? Time began then too. So that means that outside of time and space, there must be a reality, and that uncaused cause. And see, that's what God is, the uncaused. So if God exists outside of space and time, which he must because he created space and time, then
Right.
that can explain a lot of things. And anything from that order that's or even in the created order, if it's not from this earth, the angels, in the creation account in the Bible, the accounts, it talks about the stars singing for joy, talking about the angels celebrating the creation. Well, that means that they witnessed it, they were there, maybe they even helped, who knows.
Mm,
So that is by definition extraterrestrial. They're outside the
agreed.
earth.
Agreed. What about your theories or your thoughts on the fact that maybe many of these beings are already here sharing space within the planet or our oceans? We see these crafts just flying out of the water, going into the mountains. Maybe a lot of them are already here.
Well, it's a very interesting idea. And in my second book, the Paranormal Christian book 2, I devote about 20% just to the topic of UFOs, and I take
Oh,
it from
interesting.
the yes, from the classic stories, the history of UFOs, to the close encounter experiences of today, the ATIP program, all of that stuff.
Hmm.
And I've always been interested in UFOs ever since I was a little kid. I went to see Close Encounters of the Third Kind when I was 8 years old. I went to the drive-in with my mom and my stepdad.
This
It was
is a great
one
flick,
of the
especially at a
coolest
drive-in.
things. Oh
Yeah,
yeah, at the drive-in, scared the crap out of me.
right.
Just loved it, freaked me out. That whole thing with Devil's Tower and stuff, and it's just like, oh my god, it was amazing, amazing.
Right.
And I came at it in those days from the point of view that extraterrestrials must be flying to us in nuts and bolts spacecraft. That's just kind of what I
Mm,
assumed and what I believed and what I wanted it to be. Um, and my mom and didn't have any. My mom, stepdad didn't have any issues with that. Like we never thought that it conflicted with our faith, and I still don't. You
right.
know, the Pope actually made headlines in 2014 when he spoke to his clergy about the possibility of baptizing aliens.
It's like
And
people
that
thinking,
so that raised a lot
yeah.
of questions, but The
Yes.
point is, for God so loved the cosmos, right? We talked about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So what are they? Well, like I said, angels are extraterrestrial. So I already mentioned that we have an interdimensional experience that's going on. So there is interaction that's happening. But I think what you're asking me is, are there people, beings like something like us, intelligent, sentient beings coming from other star systems and interacting with us here? A lot of people believe that. I'm
Mm.
definitely open to that possibility, but I just have some questions because I don't see the evidence, honestly.
Mm.
I know there's a lot of sightings,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also a lot of our own stuff that's
Oh,
probably flying around out there that we,
absolutely. Reverse
you know,
engineering, things of that nature, for
well,
sure. For
Ben Rich
sure.
of Skunkworks, okay, from area, I mean, we're talking like Area 51 stuff, which is real.
Mm-hmm.
Area 51, Groom Lake, we all know that it's real.
Yep.
Where they
Mm-hmm.
developed the stealth bomber.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, like I say, I'm an Air Force veteran and Space Force
Mm-hmm.
uh, civilian, and my opinions obviously are my own. They
Yeah, of
may not
course.
necessarily reflect what the Air Force or the Space Force
Of
teaches or
course.
believes, but I can tell you that I've seen these things, up close and in flight. The most
Mm-hmm.
high tech equipment that we have
Mm-hmm.
that's out there, from the Minotaur launches, the Delta 4, the Atlas 5, the space
Mm-hmm.
shuttle. I've witnessed these things firsthand.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been a lifelong watcher of the heavens and the skies and the stars.
Yes.
I
Yes.
love astronomy. When I was a little
Mm-hmm.
kid, it was either dinosaur books or astronomy books that I was checking
Right.
out of the library.
Right.
And so I know what a satellite looks like
Mm-hmm.
in orbit. I know what the space shuttle looks like. I mean, you can see the space shuttle. I mean, not space shuttle, excuse me.
Space station.
The space station you can see with
Yeah.
the naked eye.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
If in the right conditions with a dark enough sky. So all these things very interesting. But Ben Rich said that there are things that are 50 years ahead of anything that we know about. So if it's 50 years ahead of, the stealth bomber and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
you start to wonder. You see these flying wing concepts, which,
Mm-hmm.
when Kenneth Arnold had his sighting, and
Mm-hmm.
he talked about these craft that were skipping like saucers, which is where we get flying saucers from.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look at the artist rendering, it looks a lot like a flying wing, which actually were already fielded at that time. By 1939, these things were flying. If
Mm-hmm.
you saw a flying wing before, I mean, having seen, for example, the B-2 bomber, okay, it's made for stealth. It
Right.
comes at you, it looks like a fingernail on the horizon. It's all black, okay? It's very otherworldly looking. It doesn't make a sound.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It can actually bomb you from a distance where it's so high that you can't even see it. These
Mm-hmm.
are very mysterious things. If you saw that craft and didn't know what it was, you would think it was a UFO. So, and these are the things that we know about. And there's a $90 billion black budget outside of the purview of Congress. Now, these are documented facts, and I'll talk about this in my series, The Paranormal
Right.
Christian,
Right.
and book 2 especially, when we talk about UFOs. So, yeah, a lot of these things that we're seeing, the triangles, uh, uh,
Are those
uh,
ours?
I think they're ours. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what I think a lot of the sightings are. So
I think there's more of those in the skies than there are extraterrestrials. Some contactees who are regular contactees have stated that there aren't a lot that are airborne, not these days. Where you have to go back, I think, is when you go back to ancient times and you have people like Da Vinci, and you look at some of the biblical paintings that are very famous, and you see crafts like the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. There are crafts sitting in the sky in these paintings, and these were done in medieval times when there was no air traffic.
Yeah, no, that's a very compelling topic, and I actually
Yeah.
talk about this in my book too, and I actually include a couple of those paintings in my book. So I acknowledge that, and actually, if you look at Ezekiel's wheel,
Yes.
for
Correct. Yeah.
example, the wheels
Yes.
that is reported. Now, of course, this is a vision, so there's all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of ways to look at it. but
Right.
it really does sound like a craft. So then you have to ask yourself, is it extraterrestrial in the sense of, extra biological creatures,
Mm-hmm.
sentient beings like us, or could it be angelic
Right.
visitations? Now, who's to say? Well, angels don't. I hear, and it's funny because a lot of the ancient alien people, which I love that. I love the
Yes.
ancient astronaut concept. And it's one of my favorite
Yes.
shows. But they
Right.
really dig in on this one, and they say, well, even the great Eric von Daniken is one of the things he talks about was the God I worship doesn't need ships to fly around. Well, how do you know? How do you know angels don't use ships of some sort?
How do you know they're not aliens?
You
It's
know,
like,
it could be either or.
mm-hmm.
But who's to say that angels can't fly light ships? Maybe they do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they do. It appears that they do
We
from what I
don't know
read.
for sure. That's just it. We're these little we're human beings, on the grand scheme of things, we're down here. There's so much more evolution, I
Right.
believe,
And it just
that
makes God that much bigger, right? It doesn't push God away. It makes God bigger. And
mhm.
when you look at it, wow, this is where I believe in the interdimensional
Yes.
hypothesis makes a lot more sense to me, because
Yes,
if you
it's
look
true.
at
Yeah.
physics,
Yeah.
again, our Milky Way galaxy, okay, it's 100,000 light years
Mhm.
across. I mean, traveling at the speed of light, it would take
Mhm.
100,000 years to get across just our own galaxy.
Yes.
So, the physics that it would take. And here's the other thing too, is like, okay, if they come, why are they hiding? I mean, maybe they are. It's possible, it's
Right.
possible that they are hiding, but why would something of that technological advantage have to hide away in the Arctic? I'm thinking they're going to have the prime real estate. They're going to have all the beachfront property, right?
Yeah,
Why
yeah.
are they why are they at the North Pole?
I
You
think
know,
maybe ancient civilization. If you're getting in the Antarctic, maybe it's just ancient civilizations. How many have ended up under the ocean? Like, let's face it, the planet, ice age, everything. It's gone through a lot of changes. There's
right.
a lot that we don't see
But
because
why
of.
are they extraterrestrials? Maybe it's just us. Maybe it's
Oh,
just an older version of
yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I
You
agree.
know,
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
there's out of place artifacts. I
Yeah.
personally believe in worlds before ours. I think,
Yes.
and if you start talking about monoliths on the
Mm-hmm.
moon and Mars and things, which, I mean, it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There's some photographs out there that'll really make you wonder: is that extraterrestrials, or is that ancient humans? Is
Oh,
that us before us?
yes.
I'm a
Yeah.
big believer in the pre-Adamic civilizations. For example, if you look in the Genesis account where it talks about the creation, um, in the beginning, and it talks about void. It talks about the earth was void. And if you actually look at the original Hebrew on that, it's speaking as if in a state of destruction,
Right.
or confusion. So, how do we know that these aren't cycles? That maybe, all the stuff we're doing now. I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, right? It says that in Ecclesiastes.
Right.
We're discovering space flight. We're the aliens now. We've stepped on other worlds,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But maybe in millennia and time immemorial, maybe we already did this stuff before and now we're doing it again, which is why we got to be careful. We don't want to, we mean the nuclear proliferation on the
Mm-hmm.
earth and the ability that humans have to just basically destroy ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Has this happened before? There's evidence on Mars of nuclear explosions. There's elements that have been discovered,
Yeah.
and it makes you wonder. So, it's a
Right.
lot to think about.
It is a lot to think about. I mean, they could, a lot of people believe that grace, for example, that's us with will for our future. So,
Right,
I mean, let's
right.
face it, we're not the first kick of the can on the planet, and there's a lot of things that are out of place artifacts, like you say, that have been discovered that go back hundreds of millions of years.
Yes,
Intelligent stuff. So,
right.
I completely agree with you. I just want to hit on some questions. Think about this: humans only, or comments only, see a very limited light spectrum. There could be creatures around us all the time outside of our spectrum that we simply cannot see. I agree, but here's a question for you. I do agree with that, Chris. Richard, you think Enlil may be the who Christians call Satan's or the devil? Enlil is Anunnaki. If you're getting into the Anunnaki,
That's a very interesting question. The the problem I have with Sitchins and the study of the Anunnaki and things like that, I
Hmm.
think we're probably looking at some of the same things, but you're really mostly dealing with the ideas coming from one scholar. So I mean, it's interesting
Hmm.
and it's informative. But yeah, I think anecdotally, people have called the devil a lot of different things, you know,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of the gods that have been worshipped over time, you know, these beings are there. In the Bible, it talks about that God takes his place among the assembly of the gods.
Nah,
The- you know,
thank you.
you know,
Thank you.
Elohim
Yes.
can be plural and it can be
Yes.
singular. And if you
Yes.
actually dig
Yes.
into that, you'll see that, and this is why, again, a lot of times with the very common Christian concept,
Hmm.
it's not really biblical though. That I mean, and the whole thing is like, well, you shall have no other. The Bible says you shall have no other gods
Before me.
before me.
And
So
that's
wait a minute.
Yahweh, the
So
Hebrew God.
who are the other gods then? So
That's
that
right.
implies there are other gods,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
get into.
Thank you.
I actually devoted a whole chapter to this topic,
I
the other
love
gods,
that.
in my first book, the Paranormal
A
Christian,
lot of
book one.
people get but see, because you're open-minded. See, I am more intrigued with the Old Testament and other ancient writings, more so than the New Testament, because that alone basically says and states that there was something else. And a lot of the ancient, artifacts or ancient monuments and things like that that we see lead into the direction that perhaps, just perhaps, that was exactly the case. And I know even with like Catholicism, a lot of the alleged demonic names are in fact just ancient gods to some cultures.
Well, yeah, and so you think about it. So God works through a hierarchy.
Hmm.
We earlier we were talking about the communion of saints,
Hmm.
and so but and why, so a lot of people through the Christian perspective, and again, it's more like a preponderance of caution,
Right.
but it's like yeah, that's fine. You can work through Jesus directly
Hmm.
with God and everything, but you may be working with an angel and you don't even know it because God is working through that angel.
Sure.
And these beings were created. It talks about, in the Bible, you see stories like talking about in Daniel, where it talks about the Prince of Persia,
Hmm.
and things like that, and where Michael has to come and assist and being prevented. And so you get these ideas of these regional these beings and these cosmic entities that are in charge of perhaps entire nations, like beings like Zeus. Well, if you look at Zeus, um there's some commonalities with Baal. Okay, they're both
Yes.
depicted with lightning bolts in their hands.
Yes.
And you
Yes.
think about this, so I think that all of these beings are part of the divine council,
Hmm.
but some of them may choose to go their own way. It talks about this in the war in heaven and things like that. It's
Mm.
depicted in the Bible, and if that happens, well, then you've got some
You got
competing
some
factions there.
division.
You got
Yes.
some
Yes.
division,
Mm.
but I think they were all intended to serve and lead and part of that divine council, part of that great hierarchy of the cosmic realm.
Mm.
And yeah, and in the Nephilim, back to the Nephilim, it talks about these were the stories of legend. So then your mind just explodes with ideas about the mythologies of the world.
Hmm.
You start talking about you know beings like Hercules,
Right.
half god, half human,
Right.
Thor, Zeus. Where do all
Hmm.
these stories come from? When the northern lands that were believed in Thor and Odin and those
Hmm.
mythologies, those and no disrespect intended. I mean, these
Hmm.
are the religions of those people.
Hmm.
When the Christian priests encountered them, the when you talk about the Norse mythology and how it all ends and everything with Ragnarok,
Hmm.
at the end, as the end of the gods, in their legends and their stories, it's Ragnarok. And when Ragnarok happens, all of it ends with a man and a naked man and a woman
Mm.
and a tree, you know?
Right.
Right? So
That just spins right off there.
it just spins right off. And
Right.
so the priests were able to say,
Mhm.
well, okay, well, let me tell you what happens next in the story, you
Right.
know? So they
Right.
didn't have to throw away everything that they knew. And actually, Thor's hammer became the Christian cross for a lot of people.
Right.
And we still have Thor's Day, right?
We
So,
do.
you
We
know,
do. We're
and you
gonna have
talk
to.
about Saturday, Saturn, right?
That's right.
And
Symbolism.
that's in the
Yes.
identification with the Hebrew nation, and
Yes.
Saturn is important. And
Very much so.
but God is at the head of all of it, right?
Hmm.
And
Well,
so
the creator. People keep saying we're looking for the creator. Who's the creator? I think it just comes down to different names as per different cultures. But I have to hold that thought because I have to do a very quick station and sponsor ID. So, if you guys are just tuning in, it should have been an hour and a half ago. Anyway, you are listening to The Outer Realm, and our special guest is Richard D. Lewis, the Paranormal Christian. We're so grateful to have him here. It's been an interesting conversation. We are on the United Public Radio Network, UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3, 107.7 from the beautiful city of New Orleans. And we are on Roku, people. Roku, check it out, new station. You're missing a lot of good content there. So station is growing over there as well. Big thank you to our sponsors, Folgers Coffee, who definitely sponsor our show each and every night and make all of this goodness possible. So thank you, Folgers. Big thank you to Dr. Snick, Justin Snicker, award-winning composer, for his intro and his outro. That is his voice you hear, his music you hear. Big thank you. Also, huge thank you to graphic artist Steve McGinnis. Actually, just artist. He does beautiful freehand stuff, but he is responsible for all of the amazing graphics you see here on the Outer Realm. So thank you, and we're gonna get right back to business. So let me get back to just getting on a little bit of the comments here. We were made after the angels and the jinn. So who is to say they are not here as well, just on a different vibration? Dimensional. I like that.
absolutely.
I like that that concept. Absolutely. Adrian says, Michelle or Richard. Richard's our guest. We'll give you the honor. What is your definition of God? The one Christians worship and acknowledge? In other words, what is the difference between the Christian God versus other gods? Take it away. This is definitely your cup of tea.
Thank you for that question. But first of all, I just wanted to also thank Folgers personally,
Ah,
and coffee in general, because
coffee in general. I like that.
if you want to explore these topics, you might need a little caffeine at times.
Mhm.
But no, so it's very interesting. Yahweh, the Christian God, we believe is the great creator God who
Mhm.
created all the other gods. So, in a nutshell, that's what the divine council is all about, and that's what that means. It's
Mhm.
very interesting if you look at one of the examples from the New Testament, where when Paul was in Athens, and he was saying, I see that you people are very religious, and he saw the statues to all of their various gods,
Mm.
and then they had one statue in particular that was to the unnamed God, and he said, I'm here to tell you who that one is, right?
Wow.
Which is very interesting. So he didn't, throw away their faith. He just said, he actually acknowledged it and said, let me tell you about this unnamed God that you guys are knowing about. And what that
Mhm.
also tells me too, and again, these are kind of things that you have to really look at with insight, these stories in the Bible. That tells me that God was reaching out to these people, and through all these faiths, God is, projecting himself,
Right.
and then we receive it. So even if you have no revealed religion,
Mhm.
the Bible talks about that God declares himself through his creation. The skies, the heavens declare his handiwork. So that's why our Native American brothers and sisters understood there's a great spirit. You just know it, and you
Mhm.
don't know this implicitly but as humans, the Bible talks about that God is imprinted on our hearts.
Mhm. Right. Right. I agree with all of that. I do. Here's a bit of a twist, because I am a big believer in mindset and how we can create the things around us. But if you believe that thoughts create reality, like manifesting your reality, actually that's this quantum stuff, then Jesus Christ is real, simply because the thoughts and heartfelt beliefs of millions of people over the years have made it so. So prayer, just intention. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Jesus is real, and
It was definitely a real person. Absolutely.
absolutely, Jesus of Nazareth. And I've experienced. I mean, I have a personal relationship with
Hmm.
Jesus. I mean, I
Mm,
know Jesus. Jesus is my friend,
mhm,
my God, my King, my counselor, my everything.
mhm.
But this the idea of thoughts creating reality. I mean, this
That's
is
a
like kind of
tulpa.
like, well, um, we talk about law of attraction,
Mhm,
and the universe. The Bible teaches us that God spoke the universe into being, and we're like mini creators. We're able to speak
mm,
things into being, but it needs to be in accordance with divine purpose and God's will. And this is why, when you look at, for example, the difference between saying a prayer and casting a spell, it's a very similar thing. But if you're actually sending out intentions of harm and wanting to go against the good of the other, then that's where things start turning dark and start
mm.
becoming evil. But do I think Jesus is there because we've conjured him? No, with our collective consciousness. No, I don't see it
I think
quite
it's
quite that
more of
way.
of empowering, my mindset, because the power of intention is very powerful. It
It is.
really is. I mean, look
It's
around.
real.
Yes,
That's right.
exactly. However, with that being said, Adrienne says, so the original first self-proclaimed God, the original one. Who is he? So the original one. Are you asking, Adrian? Are we talking? Like, is Yahweh the original? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, I believe that he is.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just clarifying with her. This is just a comment, or is there a question coming with it?
And
So,
if you look at the stories in the Bible where when God is asked, what is your name? And the answer
mm,
given is I am. And that's
mm.
the thing, is because at the end of the day,
Oh, she's pondering.
it's
Okay.
all, you have to have an uncaused cause. For every effect there's a cause.
Mhm.
And this can't go on forever. At some point it has to stop. There has to be an uncaused cause.
Yeah,
That's I am. I exist. The being.
I
And it's not
am.
something that I expect us to even be able to truly comprehend, you
Mhm.
know. So because we are part of the creation, we are
Mhm.
existing in tandem with this wildly spinning,
Mhm.
planet, solar system, galaxy. All of it is moving, speeding, flying, and we're all a part of it.
Mhm. Right. Right. So
Yes.
so so the creator, in your opinion, did he create all of these, if these extraterrestrial beings are us, and whether it's past or present or future, all one creator?
Yes. I believe that God is sovereign over everything,
Mhm.
that exists.
Right.
And in the book of John, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and
Mhm.
everything that was created was created through Him, and that
Mhm.
person is Jesus. So Jesus is God
Mhm.
also,
Mhm.
right? And He's also Creator. And this is very interesting because this is very unique among all the world religions of God becoming man.
Right.
So when you speak to Jesus about your problems, I mean, he gets it.
Mm.
He's been there. He's felt all of the temptations, all of the things that we suffer, the pain,
Mhm.
hunger, thirst, tiredness,
Mhm.
probably anger and frustration, all of those kind of things without sinning. See, that's what we believe in the Christian church. So this is a God that I can get behind, because this is a God that knows what it's like down here with
Mm.
us.
Let's put another twist on it. Okay. Being that, I mean, many extraterrestrials have these phenomenal, some are said to have like phenomenal abilities, telekinesis, telepathy, like just amazing things that they can levitate, items or objects, or they've been known to cure people. Um, what are your thoughts? Do you think God Himself or Jesus Himself that did all these amazing things? Do you think that perhaps there's just some supreme extraterrestrial being?
Well,
Not that I'm just saying, like, I want to just throw it
right.
out there, like it's God and alien. I'm just trying to, in a nice roundabout sort of way, present it.
Well, God is by nature extraterrestrial because God
Right.
exists outside of the created form, and so would anything else that's outside of that. So,
Okay.
but extraterrestrial might not mean what some people might think it means. I
Right.
personally believe that Jesus, well, we know Jesus of Nazareth was a real human, and
Right.
we see this historically, not just in the
Correct.
biblical accounts and the extra biblical accounts.
Hmm.
I don't think there's anybody that really debates that anymore. But
Right.
how was Jesus able to do these things? Josephus talks about this miracle worker, and how could he do those things? It's because of his great faith. That is how he was able to do these things. But when you start talking about telekinesis, healing, these are all
Mm.
things that we see in our own experience. We see miracle healings. We see people
Mhm.
laying
Mhm.
on hands and prayer affecting change and healing.
Mhm.
Levitation, I mean, levitation can
People
be
do it.
accomplished with technology, perhaps.
Well,
Um,
I mean,
uh,
some people look at monks from their chanting and vibration, how they can levitate off the ground, even if
I
it's just
mean,
the bed.
there's people like superheroes. Some of the things
Yes.
that you can just
Yeah.
do with your mind. I mean, walking on coals, you see people do that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And
Yes.
sometimes there's scientific explanations for these amazing things.
Mhm.
Human potential is it can be quite extreme, but uh, telepathy. I mean, we communicate with telepathy.
Absolutely. Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
we
Absolutely.
do it. We do it. So if we
Mhm.
do it, dreams. So there's shared dreams. There's people are talking about shared death experiences now. Near death
Yes,
experiences used to be the thing. Now it's shared death experiences.
it's true. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Chris says, I think God is technically, and I agree with this, outside of religion, because I do believe religion itself is something that man has created, to bring people together. But God himself is every religion and more. Humans need religion and use it as a way to define God, but God is such a force that we can't really define it.
That's a very interesting thought. Here's the thing: is religion has become kind of a bad word among so many people. Like, well, I'm spiritual, I'm not religious.
Right, right.
Being religious is not a bad thing, and
Mhm.
religion is not a bad word. And if you look at it from God's point of view, now, like I mentioned earlier, God declares Himself through His handiwork, so you can experience God
Mhm.
through just experiencing the planet. And our ancient ancestors, that's what they had.
Mhm.
But at some point, when God wants to reveal Himself in a more clear and distinct way to let us know more about Himself, well, I mean, this is religion. This is that study. It's you know
Mhm.
it's
But is
God.
religion man-made? Like, as an institution? Because when I think of the creator, I think of the indigenous people. They would go out and sit, let's say, in the forest or on a mountain, and they would connect with their creator. They really didn't have a name for him other than our creator. It wasn't so organized, they just did it.
I don't consider a religion to be bad or to be.
Not necessarily
It's
bad, no, I'm just saying, do you find
I
this as
see.
something that's or more organized?
I do think that it's revealed to us from God, and
Mhm.
we should organize. I think
Right.
He wants us to do that. He wants us to live in community, and He wants us. And
Mhm.
for example, just knowing right and wrong, and the natural laws. I mean, if you look at the commandments, I mean, these are which chiefly
Right.
is to love your neighbor, love God, and love your neighbor, and all things propagate through this. So this idea to exist in communion both with each other and with God is something I think God wants us to do.
Okay, yeah. Well, absolutely. I think we just get into that. It's a cultural thing, perhaps,
Well, where
right?
religion I think becomes bad is on the extremes. Any philosophy or belief in the extremist version
Mm,
is usually a bad thing, and it's actually somebody may think they're speaking for God, but they're not acting very godlike or very Christ-like.
mhm.
And you see this through very for any type of religious extremism. But
No.
when you talk about excluding others, when you talk about,
Mm-hmm.
you're wrong and I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well, how
you
many
know,
wars have been waged in the name of God? Not a
right. And
very, like you say, not very godlike.
everybody
Right.
thinks that they're right. And when you start,
Right.
you know, your objective ends up harming others,
Yes.
you're not worshiping the true God
Right.
when you're doing that.
Right. Tamara says, we are limited by our own ideas of our limits and have undefined capabilities if we step out of our own way. Yeah, that makes sense. Go
I would
get out of
agree with
our own
that.
way and then
I would agree with that.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's a personal
Yeah.
struggle as much of as a collective one. I mean,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
these are the challenges, but this is also how we grow as well.
Exactly. So we're slowly inching into the top of the hour. So this is the part of the show where you basically fill us in on anything you have coming up and how people can find your books and promote.
Well, I'm very active. My second book, The Paranormal Christian, released recently, and you can get the whole book series on my website, richarddlewisauthor.com. You can find out more there, richarddlewisauthor.com, or you can go to Amazon or any of the online booksellers,
Mm,
and or you can go to your local bookstore and just tell them you want your copy of The Paranormal Christian.
mm-hmm,
Either of the books. I'm working on book 3. As I have time, I'm also answering a lot of media engagements, radio
mm-hmm.
appearances, and so on. I'm going to be at the upcoming Alien Con in Pasadena. I'm going to be there as a vendor.
Ooh,
So
excellent.
if you're there, please stop by my table and say hi. Always happy to meet and greet the folks out there. And I'm going to be at the UFO Con coming up in the San Francisco area in
Excellent.
March. And I'm actually going to be a
Excellent.
featured speaker there. And I'm going to do a whole hour-long talk on UFOs. So that should be a
Wow.
lot of fun.
It absolutely will be. I think people just have a really big interest in it. I think especially since disclosure and everything else has been happening, now people are like, oh, so we're allowed to talk about it now. So, I think it's becoming people are becoming a little bit more open-minded, I think, because of the fact that there are shows like Ancient Aliens. There are shows and episodes such as this and speakers such as yourself who are going out there and saying, yes, this is a thing. Because again, you're accredited, being ex-Air Force and seeing everything that you've seen. I think it's people can take that coming from someone such as yourself and say, okay, see, this
Oh
guy's seen
yeah.
stuff.
Oh yeah.
This
No,
guy's seen stuff.
I have, and it's very interesting to me. And I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a
Right,
lifelong explorer. I'm a journalist, by trade, so I have a naturally inquisitive mind.
right.
And here's the thing that people like about my books is I don't tell you what to think.
Mhm,
I present the evidence. I do my own research. I look at the famous case studies. I do my own research and then my own
mm,
experiences. I put it all together. I tell you what the Christian faith teaches us, and not just what some
mhm.
dogmatic, very
Right,
restrictive viewpoint says, but like, what does
right,
it really say? What does it really mean?
right.
And then I tell you what I think, and then I let you decide for yourself. So I don't pretend to have all the answers. I've got
Mhm.
some good ideas though, and I really think I'm onto something
Yes,
with what I'm doing here. So yeah, I just love to hear from all of you. I'm very active on social media.
excellent.
I'm still at that point where I answer my own emails. So if you
Right.
email me, richarddlewisauthor.com, you can connect with me there. And also, as a journalist, I'm into a lot of stuff. My mind is insanely curious and
Mhm.
busy. And it's not just,
Right,
hey, if you can't vibe with me on the paranormal stuff or the Christian
right,
stuff, hey, I'm a film journalist. I'm a sports fanatic.
right.
I
There's a
mean,
lot
I'm
of
sure we
other
could get
ways to
together on a
connect.
lot. Yes. You,
Right.
you want to talk? Hey, we'll talk about the football playoffs this weekend.
We can
I'm
do
going
that.
nuts. The latest boxing match, the Dodgers, the
Right.
Lakers. I love it all.
I
Horror
love it.
films. I love horror movies. People are like,
Yeah,
"What's a Christian doing watching horror movies?" I mean, are you kidding me? There's all kinds of God stories in these horror movies.
exactly,
But yeah,
exactly.
I love
Yes, I
that
still
stuff.
like that whole I love horror movies as well. It's just, I love
Yeah,
people's creativity on different levels.
it's like, well, it's sci-fi to you. To me, it's a documentary. I mean, I don't know. It's like,
Right, so it's true.
but
It's
but
true. You're looking at it in a total different way. You're looking at, what are they not just saying,
Yeah,
right?
there's all
What's
kinds of
really
good
going
stuff out
down.
there. I just watched this movie by Scarlett Johansson. Well, Scarlett Johansson stars in it. It's
Yes.
called Under the Skin,
Oh,
and it really blew my mind. It's a very obscure kind of independent film.
oh,
And I just put a review on that movie on my review site, which is LA Film Reviews, and
okay.
I'm the only LA Film Reviews on Facebook, and that's a
Right.
growing community. And people there just want to talk about movies and TV shows and stuff. The
Right.
occasional sports story. So that's another one of my passions as a film journalist. Doing behind the scenes and
Hmm.
reviews and stories. I love all that stuff. So yeah, there's
Right.
a lot of ways we can connect with each other.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was a lot of fun. It was really informative. I love bouncing ideas around,
Oh
and the
yeah.
chat room enjoyed it. And I'm sure, I have no doubt that our listeners really got a lot of education out of it as well.
Thank you, and I really did too, and I really enjoyed it. I hope I can come back and see you again sometime, Michelle.
Absolutely. Let me know when that third book is out. We can definitely do it again. Especially like alien stuff. People love it on this network. Well, UFO paranormal. Paranormal radio. It's big.
I love it too.
Yeah. So thank you. I'll be in touch. I will be in touch with you as well, and I'll send you links to the show and things like that.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, everybody, we are at the top of the hour. It is that time. I feel like Carol Burnett. I just want to break out in song. Anyway, big thank you to Richard for joining us tonight. Very nice of him to take time out of his day because he's out in LA right now. Rush through rush hour just to get here. And definitely an interesting segment to say the least. Big thank you to Folgers Coffee for sponsoring the show. Dr. Snick, aka Justin Snicker, I apologize, Steve McGinnis. Thank you guys all for your contributions to the Outer Realm. Wherever you're listening, like us, subscribe, join, whatever it takes. Go find us on Roku. Just saying, find us on Roku. Now you can just do it on big screen TV and really nice, nice video, unlike, so certain social media platforms. I'll leave it right there. Now for next week, Wednesday night's gonna be a lot of fun. Dolly Safran, our aware experiencer, is coming back from a bit of an out of this world Q&A. She's going to be answering a lot of questions because we always run out of time. And she just doesn't have the time to answer the questions. So she's going to come in here and she's going to let us know what's been going on. And she is just fantastic and very well versed. So don't want to miss her. Thursday night, we welcome for the very first time Max Hawthorne. He's going to be discussing his book, Monsters and Marine Mysteries. Right? Like, that's not going to be a good time. So be sure to tune in. Yeah, Dolly, that's right. Yeah, where are you, Dolly? You weren't in here tonight. Anyway, have a fantastic weekend. Guys, we will see you next week. So good night.